Welcome to Cooking on the Kenai. Today, I would like to show you how to make a yeasted potato bread. Making bread is one of the things I really enjoy doing. In the bowl of my mixer, I have 2 cups of flour. To that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of yeast, a scant 2 teaspoons worth of salt, and a 1/4 cup of white sugar. I'm going to blend that together for a minute or two, well, just a couple seconds to stir it together. In the pot that I have down here, I have a 2-serving portion of instant potatoes. To that, you add a 1/4 cup of melted butter, I prefer to stir it in when I add each item to keep it from being such a problem to stir in later. 3/4 of a cup of milk. I like using this recipe because the potatoes give the dough a silky feel and the bread has a nice soft texture. And 2 whole eggs. Since the potatoes are warm, they are adding the warmth to the yeast to help it to grow. The sugar also helps the yeast to grow. So I'm going to pour all this mixture into my mixer. And turn on my mixer to medium to get it blended. Move it down, scrape your bowl. And put it on medium speed to blend for 2 minutes. To develop the gluten, it helps with the structure of the bread. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I'm going to turn off my mixer, bring my bowl down, scrape down the sides, and if you're fortunate enough to have a KitchenAid mixer, you can switch now to use your dough hook to help mix in the rest of your flour. If you do not have a mixer, you can make this bread by hand. Just use a wooden spoon to stir in all the flour. So I've added my dough hook on here, and I am going to add another cup of flour to my mixture and beat that for another 2 minutes on medium once I get it started. Be careful when you're putting this in to start with, because if you aren't watching what you're doing, your flour will go everywhere when you are beating it. Okay, on medium, 2 minutes longer to develop the gluten for the structure of the bread. Once you have beaten your dough for the second time for 2 minutes, you can add another 1/2 cup to a cup of flour to your mixer and turn on your mixer on low to start with so it doesn't splatter everywhere, and beat that in. If you need a little bit more flour to form your dough, you could add that later. Yeast breads give a range of flour because of the differences in the temperature, moisture, and humidity of both the air and the flour, so you might have to add a different amount every time. Okay, my dough is completed. it's touchable. I can touch it and it doesn't come off onto my fingers. So now what I need to do is take it off my dough hook and put it onto my pastry mat. You will notice that underneath my pastry mat I have it's a shelf liner to hold my pastry mat in place so it doesn't move around when I knead my dough. On the other side of my pastry mat, I have a large bowl that has been oiled. So I have oil in the bottom of my bowl so that I can place my kneaded dough into it, ready to go. So I'm going to flour my surface. Not a lot, you'll need some on there because your dough still needs to be kneaded. Once you get your dough out of your bowl, you need to immediately get this bowl in water so that it will not be hard to clean later. To knead, roll your dough in the flour and then you are going to push it, fold, turn. So fold, push, turn, fold, push, turn, fold, push, turn. That is how you knead. And you need to knead this even with a mixer for a good 3 to 5 minutes to get it to a texture that is very, very soft, like a baby's cheek. And it doesn't absorb very much more flour. And you can see little blisters underneath the skin of the dough. What that indicates is that your yeast is working and it is forming carbon dioxide gas, which is what helps raise your dough. Now, as you can see, I haven't had to add any more flour than that first little blob that I put down there. My dough is very supple. I can touch it, I can feel it, and it's not sticking to my hands. If the dough is sticking to your hands, first you're going to need to add more flour to your dough. Then put a little flour in your hands, rub them together to remove the dough that is there. Do this away from your ball of dough. Again, put flour on your hands and begin kneading again. I have been kneading my dough for 3 to 5 minutes. It is very supple, it is very soft, and I don't know, I'm hoping you can see the little blisters underneath the skin that are showing that my yeast is active. At this point, you are going to take your dough and put it in your bowl that has a little bit of oil in it so that your dough can raise. Turn your dough over after you've covered it with oil so that all of your dough is oiled. If your home is like mine, it's about 68 degrees. Your dough needs a little bit warmer temperatures than that to raise. So what I do is take a glass baking dish or any kind of a baking dish, fill it with hot water, put it on the bottom rack in my oven, put my bowl of dough on the top rack, and close the oven door. The hot, moist air from the hot water in the pan will help heat your dough and raise it. Your dough needs to double in size, which takes about 1.5 to 2 hours. Hi, our dough is done raising, and one of the nice things about making yeast dough is you don't always just have to make 2 loaves of bread. What I like to do sometimes is to take half of the bread dough and make a cinnamon raisin loaf. So I'll show you how to do that as well as making a regular loaf of bread. Okay, as you can see, our dough has risen twice its normal size. To tell if your dough has risen twice its normal size, Poke 2 fingers in it. If the indentation remains, that means your dough has risen enough. So we need to release the air, and we're going to put it out on a lightly floured surface and knead our dough just a little bit to release some of the air that has built up within the dough. I'm going to divide my dough in half like this, put the other half in my bowl, and to this half, to form a loaf of bread, you can do this one of 2 ways. The easy way that I do a lot is to roll my dough back and forth like this on my counter, kind of tucking it in as I go, just like this, and pinching the bottom together and making it look like this, and it fits right in my bread pan. So that's one way. I'll be showing you the other way with the second roll, or the second piece of dough. This is also how you roll out your dough to make cinnamon rolls or any type of a yeasted roll like that. You take your bread dough, I try to make it into a rectangle to start with, and you want to roll your dough out if your bread pan is 9 inches long, you want to roll this about 10 inches long and twice that wide. So you're rolling this out, and yeast dough springs back. So that's one of the things that you have to remember, is it doesn't like to go where you want it to. If you were making a regular loaf of bread, you would just roll this up like this and tuck in the edges and put it in your pan. But since I wanted to show you how to make a cinnamon raisin bread, I'm going to do something a little different. In my little bowl here, I have about 2 tablespoons of melted, not quite melted, softened butter. And I'm going to spread that over my dough, leaving about a 1/2 inch on one edge that isn't covered in butter. Okay? The dough kind of shrunk, which it has a tendency to do, so I'm going to pull it back out so it's a rectangle. To that, in my bowl here, I have about 1/3 cup of brown sugar with 1.5 teaspoons or so of cinnamon. And if you were making cinnamon rolls, this is what you would do also. And you want to spread the cinnamon sugar evenly around your dough, getting as much in there as you would like. I don't like too much in a bread. In cinnamon rolls, I'd probably add all of that. And I have about 3/4 cup of raisins in here. And you just put those on there. And if it looks like it's too much, don't add them all. Try to get them to the edges, kind of evenly spaced, like this. And then you're going to take your dough, and I'm seeing that my pan is going to fit better this direction, so I'm going to roll my dough over the top of my raisins and my cinnamon sugar mixture, just like this, tucking it in as I go. And as I roll it over, I have a few raisins that are loose, so I'll tuck those in. Pinch my edge closed, like that. And I am going to tuck it under. Now I can see that it's a little too long, which happens. So I'm just going to cut off a couple of little pieces like this off the ends, turn this underneath like this, and put that in my pan. So I have my 2 loaves of bread, and I have 2 little extra cinnamon rolls that I will be putting into a small baking dish to bake along this with me. What you do now is take your 2 loaves of bread and your little cinnamon roll things and let them braise till they are almost doubled. Once they are doubled, you put them into a 350-degree oven for about 35 to 40 minutes, or until they're nicely golden brown on the outside. If you have a digital thermometer that you can use, if you put it inside the loaf from the side, it should read right close to 195 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they're done. I wanted to show you the breads after they had risen to almost double their size. And here are our loaves of bread. Our plain loaf of bread is right here, and this is our cinnamon raisin loaf of bread. They have almost doubled in size, and here are the little ends that I cut off the raisin bread. Now what I usually do on these larger loaves of bread is slash them about 1/2 inch deep, about 3 times across the top. You could do this one also, but you wouldn't have to. I just will so I can show you. This allows the bread to expand in the oven. You put these in the oven at 350 degrees for 35 minutes. I'm going to take these out or test them at least at 25 minutes because they are in a darker pan and they will cook faster. Our bread is done. I'm so excited to show it to you. Okay, here is our loaf of plain bread and our loaf of cinnamon raisin bread. If you like a crust that is softer and not so crunchy, take a piece of butter when your bread is hot and rub it over the top of your bread, and that makes you have a softer crust so it's not quite as crispy crunchy. If you prefer the crispy crunchy one, don't add the butter. Okay, I'm going to show you what this looks like when I slice it open. Make sure you wait 5 to 10 minutes before your bread comes out of the oven. Notice I'm sawing this with a serrated knife, and here's, oops, your fresh slice of bread. Butter just by itself will make this a grand treat for anyone. Now I'm going to take my cinnamon raisin bread out of my pan because it has sugar in it. It kind of stuck a little to the pan. So I'm taking a spatula and going around the outside edges to hopefully get it out without breaking it. I'm going to turn it on to my, ooh, that looks so good. I'm going to turn it on to my cooling rack and move my breads around like that and slice into this one. I'm going to leave this one a little crunchier on the top. So I'm going to slice into my bread. Look at that. Doesn't that just look heavenly? And here's a slice of cinnamon raisin bread. I love making bread. It fills the house with such a nice aroma and it tastes wonderful. Enjoy! Thanks for watching Cooking on the Kenai.